Hey guys, how goes it? I hope all is well in your part of the world. Big welcome to the channel if you are new. Of course, a big shout as always to our regulars. Today's watch is from Casio, and some people have referred to it in the past few years as the Marlin Mark II. Casio refer to it as the Casio Standard Ref MDV 100D 1A1JF. Now, you can still pick these up on Fleabay, as I did, for around 40 to 50 pounds, mostly coming from Asia, as I believe that they were an Asia market only release. As I say, they're a few years old now, but there is a upside down watch for today. Let's try that again. So yeah, Mark II, Marlin Mark II. That's an interesting reference, but I still haven't quite come up with a nickname for it. Lots of steel, lots of metal, but let's kick off with some specs, and then I'll give you my thoughts on aspects of the watch. So this one comes in at quite a manageable 41 mils across, but then it does extend out to 44 mils, including that crown. So overall, it's quite manageable. It's then a little bit longer because of the slight extension there of the lugs. I think at 50 mils north to south. It's a very manageable then 12 mils in depth. Your lugs over here are 20 mils. So on paper, it's a good size for many. For me specifically though, the issue with the specs is the actual dial aperture, because the dial aperture itself is only 28 mils, making that dial for me on this whole watch really quite small. So it almost seems a little bit disproportionate. It does, of course, then come with 200 meters of watery goodness. It weighs 130 grams on this unsized bracelet. But for me personally, I would swap this out for something a little sportier in rubber without hesitation. The reason being that it jangles more than Mr. Bow, and it is a plucker, and not a very pleasant plucker at that. I just put it on when it arrived, and I already lost two of my very, very precious wrist hairs in about 5 seconds. Added to that, some of these links themselves actually lock out, so the articulation on the links is utter crap. I do recognise though that for £50 we need to measure our expectations, but I think, on top of that, bear in mind that you will probably be splashing out a few more quid or dollars, etc., if you don't have a 20mm rubber to hand. As I say, it's just they lock out really, really bad. Very unimpressed with the bracelet, so that's the first thing that would come out of this. Moving on then, the bezel, as you can see around here, has almost no grips other than just what you've got here on the top surface, and it's not that easy to spin. So yeah, so basically it's downward pressure to shift it around. It works absolutely fine here in the dry, but I imagine in the wet that would be an absolute nightmare to use. It semi lines up. I think I just moved it past there. Let me just fulfill my OCD requirements and get it back in the right place. It doesn't line up that brilliantly, does it? Anyway, let's move on. But I think one of the things that appealed to me about the watch itself is that wider depth that they've given the bezel, and the fact that it does alternate between sort of the brushed and then the polished. I think that as a bezel, you don't see many bezels like that nowadays. It works really, really very well. One thing that I did find curious on it, though, is the font that they've used. Specifically, if you look at the 4 over here, that's an interesting 4. I don't know whether it's incomplete with the paint or something, but anyway, just an interesting option. I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick this up, so I'll drop in. You can just about see it there. You do have quite a subtle wave pattern on the dial. You can't see it from all angles, so you do need to get up close and then get the light right. But when you can see it, it does look really, really very good. The issue for me though is that it is too subtle. They could have been much bolder with that dial surface design and really made it stand out. On the upsides though, then you do have the lovely splash of colour with the red at the end of your seconds hand, just underneath the Marlin fishy as well, and just around then on your minute track. I think that's a great addition of colour. You've then got obviously your classic fishy on the front, and then also on the back, which is something that has appealed to the MDV fans for many years, and many are very upset about it having been removed off the newer versions. But yeah, that's marketing and license for you, as I say. So yeah, pretty nice solid stainless steel case back there. The other thing that I liked about the dial is that the hour markers there, really do sit nicely, and they've got a nice little bit of metal flashing just on the inside. So again, probably see it better in these shots outside in the sun, where you can really see how the light reflects off the steel and catches it from many different aspects, making it visually very interesting. Coming back to the dial, for me personally, I find the hands a little bit thin. It might just be me. They are essentially fit for purpose. But as I say, for me specifically, I think they could have just widened them up a little bit, specifically again around the hour hand. I think the seconds hand is ideal, but again, maybe that's just my OCD. The date window over here at the 3, I think as well, it's too small. It's very difficult to see the date on that. And I also think that the fact that they framed it with that silver lining, almost a little bit redundant, because if they'd left that out, it might actually have then left the date underneath much more visible. Onto the sides, you can see we've got lots of polishing. You've got a very nice drop in the lugs there, with the curve down nicely. So let me just throw it on wrist. Just for reference, we're rocking the new Citizen here. Very interesting watch. Interesting comments as well about how a lot of people are unimpressed that they moved away, or they moved to an automatic with this one as opposed to sticking with the Eco Drive. So that's quite interesting feedback. Let me just open this one up. As I say, drop him on wrist. Let's get rid of the hang tag while we're at it. He says it's got stuck in the in that lovely bracelet. I would cut it off, but I was kind of either thinking about maybe having this as a giveaway when we get to 1,000 subscribers, or maybe 100 watches. So I'll try and I'll just be patient with it. But as you can see, really listen to that bracelet. Yeah, it's not great at all. But as I say, mention it on wrist. Those specs. Everything, etc. It sits very nicely, uber comfortable, and I think no issues with depth or anything like that at all on the watch. I'm not a massive fan of highly polished flanks, and as I say, even just on wrist now, it's attempting to eat my wrist hairs. The crown guards, there's another thing that I wanted to focus on. Really pronounced, very nice, doing their job absolutely perfectly. But I think they are let down by that crown because it's 6 mils, and for me, it's incredibly fiddly to get in and get at. The advantage though is that it is a screw down, which is great, but it's super fiddly for me to get out. Up top, we've got a little loom pip nipple. It doesn't stick out too much, so I don't think there's much danger of it getting knocked off. The loom does look like this. So yeah, pretty fit for purpose. It's not Seiko standards, but I think absolutely fit for purpose. Let me just focus in a little bit more on the case back there, just so that you can see. So underneath, all nice and clean and quite impressive. As I say, you have very cheap stamped clasp there, like one micro adjust on there. But again, I think just for the price that you're paying, you've really got to measure your expectations on that. And I also think that put it on a proper dive bracelet, dive strap, it's going to look far better also. Maybe something black, maybe even with some red stitching on a sailcloth, just to match the red that you've got on the dial, I think would look absolutely brilliant. So I suppose as the Mark II of the Marlin, how does it compare next to its cousin. Is it better? Is it worse? Does it win? Does it lose? For me personally, straight up no. I think that the Bluey, it wins. Firstly, because of the size and the dimensions, which I think for other people is not so great, but for me with slightly larger wrists, it works much better. And secondly, because of that blue dial. It's just absolutely, absolutely delicious to look at. Brilliant. There's nothing wrong with the dial on that, but I think again, sat next to each other, you can really see my earlier point about the aperture of the dial and how much more of the watch is taken up by that very, very, very broad bezel, making it a little bit smaller. And as I say, from distance, whilst not necessarily losing too much of legibility, it is affected in comparison with its larger cousin. This one, though, I think does get several things right. I think the aesthetics of the dial and that finishing on the bezel with the alternates there, really, really, really very, very nice. And that's what drew me to it in the first place when I thought, oh, wow, that's a version that I'd not seen before, and I did really like that. I think it looks super, super cool. It's let down by an ultra crappy bracelet and some usage issues that if wet, as I mentioned before, I think that bezel is going to become an issue. It'd be slipperier perhaps than a politician describing lockdown rules. And the crown over here, I think as well, for my hands, just a little bit too small. But again, I'm sure that's as I say, my opinion. I'm sure others will perhaps view this differently. If you're a fan of the MDV range, then I'm sure that this would fit in well with your collection. Do bear in mind those couple of weak spots which I've mentioned, which perhaps may be overcomable for yourselves. For the price, though, I think it's going to be, it'll be robust enough for most of us. It's going to be super cheap to maintain and run. So just last little shot there of the two of them together. What's your favourite, guys? Which one do you prefer? Drop your comments down below. And of course, until next time, this is your host, the Bombardier, signing off. Cheers.